Hello, BookTube. We're back from my library tour. We're going to continue with this library tour. And the next shelf, this is actually going to be a library tour shelf that is very short. The video will be very short. I should warn you ahead of time, since I have to put warnings on my videos, not when they're very long, like normal people, but when they're very short. But this shelf is mostly books in series. And that's an easy thing to do quickly. And by far the bulk of the shelf is a very long series that I cannot recommend strongly enough. That is the Aubrey and Maturin novels of Patrick O'Brian. I had these things originally. I worked in a bookstore when, so far in America, the only two that had been brought out were the first two, Master and Commander and Post Captain. And I was at the information desk, and I was constantly making recommendations. And I used to joke with my customers. Some of them would come in and say, well, you haven't read this, and I really, really recommend it to you. And I would joke with them and say, I'll be the one to make the recommendations around here, mister. And despite that, I was still paying attention. And people recommended these to me so often. Oh, my God. Probably more than any other book. This was so long ago. that at the Barnes & Noble where I worked, this was so long ago that we actually separated the mass market paperbacks from the trade paperbacks. And probably customers recommended those two books to me more than any other trade paperbacks that we sold, except maybe no, I think these win. I really think they do. I was going to say Terry McMillan's first two books. Those, I got a lot of recommendations for those, and they were wonderful. But I think I got even more from these. And eventually, I just read the first one. Eventually, I did. Circumstances caused me to read the first one. And it was a learning curve. Even for me, it was a little steep because Patrick O'Brian, these are Napoleonic-era seafaring novels starring a captain named Jack Aubrey and sort of cramped, wiry Irish physician and spy named Stephen Maturin. And they strike up an unlikely friendship. And unlike many long books in series, we meet them meeting each other in this first book. They have a classic meeting. First meeting, where they originally don't like each other and then become friends. And then fast friends, brothers, as they call themselves over and over again. And it's a steep learning curve because Patrick O'Brian has steeped himself in the literature of the period, read the journals and the memoirs and the histories and whatnot, and takes you straight into the period. So his characters talk the way people would back then. They use the slang, they use the idiom, they use, once we get on board the ships, they use the nautical terminology, the jargon. And Patrick O'Brian doesn't stop to explain any of it. When you read Master and Commander, you suddenly realize how much interlinear explanation someone like Forster was doing in the Hornblower novels. How much either interlinear explanation they were doing or how much they were leaving out the period terminology in order to use more general words. None of that happens here. And the books don't come with glossaries. They come, every book, at least these original ones, everyone comes with a diagram of a ship with the parts listed, because these are the things that are mentioned far more often than anything else. And if you don't know what they are, if you don't have any idea what they are, you're not going to know where your characters are from one minute to the next. I argue that it's not important most of the time to know that, but one way or another, the sheer prevalence of jargon, of period conversation in these books led to the creation of books about that, led to the creation of books explaining the terminology and vocabulary of these books to readers. And although those books are, I know of two, and although those books are fun, when they appeared at my bookstore, I groaned. Because it's hard enough to sell these things to the normal reader without making them think they need a dictionary to read them. And you don't. You will catch on. Even if you're not familiar with ships, with sailing vessels, you will catch on to the terminology. And the terminology is not important. The important thing is, despite I know all the Patrick O'Brian purists are now screaming, but the important thing is the human dimension. Patrick O'Brian is an amazing novelist of humans, ordinary people. Not, as I always complain on this channel, I always complain that characters in novels know they're in novels and behave like characters in novels. They never have any money troubles. They always talk in quotable bits and pieces. They accept without a blink the truly weird stuff that happens in their lives. If I knew a lighthouse keeper who had a ghost lover and was one of a secret pair of identical triplets, it'd be the only thing I talk about with you ever. I would mention it in every conversation. I would say, yeah, that's a pretty nice school prize you won there, little Timmy. Did I ever tell you that I know a lighthouse keeper who's a member of a series of identical triplets and has a ghost for a lover? No? I would never stop mentioning it. That happens in probably 20 contemporary made-up stories every year, something absolutely ridiculous like that, and no one thinks anything of it. Instead, in these books, the characters are all human. They're all completely recognizably human. They do not know that they're in a novel. And that is wonderful. And to me, that is the emphasis of these books. I think that emphasis has led so many people so many people, including so many professional critics who are, you would expect, jaded enough not to do this at the drop of a hat, have compared Patrick O'Brian in these novels to Jane Austen. And as much as it might seem like heresy if you haven't read these things, I actually do agree with that comparison. Because even though Jane Austen's novels are very outre and, it's the richest of the rich and whatnot, all of her characters are real people. They embody what I'm talking about, the antithesis of what I'm talking about in contemporary made-up stories about upper-middle-class Connecticut divorce. The thing I hate about those novels is that they aren't real. The characters are fantasy creatures, so why aren't they doing magic? If I'm going to read about fantasy creatures, can I at least have them do magic so that it's interesting? And the thing about Jane Austen's characters, the reason why her books are so intensely beloved is because her characters are all real, no matter how outrageous their situations are. And same thing is true here. I read those first 2 trade paperbacks and loved them. Absolutely loved them. And although I had to read Master and Commander, I read Master and Commander, and then I went on to Post Captain, which is considerably longer. And then I went back. I had to go back and read Master and Commander again once I was sure that I sort of knew the lingo. I wanted to make sure that not knowing the lingo the first time wasn't hurting the book, wasn't hurting my understanding of the book. After that, it was off to the races, because it was right around then that Patrick O'Brian caught on mainstream, that he caught on big time in the literary world in America. The customers who had been urging me to read these books were prescient. I was right to listen to them. So these things took off, and W.W. Norton started producing them, all of them, in this country. And I got piecemeal over time. I assembled a library of all of the books in hardcover. And I read through them and annotated them in the back. There are blank pages in the back. I went through them and annotated what happens, a couple of lines of what happens, because the thing about books in the series like this, 20 more books, is that it starts to blur in your mind sometimes. So I did in the back of each of those hardcover volumes, I did a quick précis, 1 or 2 sentences at most, of what happens in the book. Then I copied out great quotes and a couple of lines of what's interesting about this book, what separates it from the others in the series. And for some unknown reason, I got rid of that set of hardcovers. Somewhere out there in the world, there is an entire set of Patrick O'Brian in hardcover that are annotated lovingly by yours truly. And then I could kick myself for that. So then I got, Norton came out with a beautiful box set of these books. You wouldn't, 20-something books, you wouldn't think, but they compressed. They made each volume several books. And it had original cover artwork over the span of the dust jackets and around the box. A beautiful, beautiful production. It's probably $1,500 now to buy one. And I got it when it first came out and thought, all right, well, I love box sets. And I always want to read these things, so this will be my set. And I got rid of that too. I got rid of that box set. No idea why or where or when. And then years passed, and I went to a Boston Public Library book sale and saw the whole of the series in trade paperback for public library book sale prices. So I got them all. And by this time, I think by that point, I was right on the edge. That was right on the edge of me starting a BookTube channel. I don't know if it was BookTube or not, but sooner rather than later, I sent away all of those books. That whole set. And once again, had no Patrick O'Brian. Now I have determined the right course of action, which is I am going to assemble a hardcover set of these books, a complete set of the hardcovers. I am now missing only 2. Volume 9 and Volume 13, I think. Yeah, Volume 9 and Volume 13 I don't have. Once I have Volume 9 and Volume 13, and I will find them, once I have them in hardcover with a dust jacket, I will then reread the whole series and re-annotate it and keep the set this time until I croak. The key here, the key here is to simply acknowledge that if I know somebody, if I meet somebody, if I meet one of you who says, I would love to read the Patrick O'Brian novels, but I never find any of them and I can't afford them new, the key here is for me to say, I will find them for you instead of, oh, let me send you mine. If I do that, if I keep doing the latter, then I'm constantly going to be rebuying books and wanting them when I don't have them. So that is the key, and I will do that. But in the meantime, this is the set that I'm assembling so far, and unfortunately, it's not complete. 9 and 13 are still missing. I don't know even which volumes those would be. They're listed here in each book, but they're not listed in by number. So I have no idea what the number on each of them would be. But anyway, that is the whole of this shelf, is Master and Commander, Post Captain, and then on down the line, missing only the 2 that I don't have. Around the end of the series, so let's see here. This is 17. 17 is the Commodore, and you can see there are differences in these because this is also the Commodore. Only you see one is, it's basically the same painting, but one has the Roman numerals on the cover and one does not. And I don't really have a preference one way or another, but once I am done with the whole set, then I will read it through lovingly and annotate it. And I mentioned this before, and several of you have said, would you please do a read-along, book by book, when you're doing that? I'd be happy to. I'd be happy to. I just need the whole set to do it. Maybe it'll be 2020. Who knows? Then the next 3 books are also books in series, and I think this series is also not complete. So I might have to look for, I think I'm missing one of these. This is Ballantine. Yeah, this is Ballantine. A few years ago, they decided to, a very great idea, they decided to, do I actually have an editor's name on here? No. Okay, well, that's in a way good. The editors at Ballantine decided to go at the Conan stories of Robert E. Howard. They started out that way. They then went on to do other things, as this series was a success. They brought them out in trade paperbacks with lots of spot illustrations and page illustrations by Greg McGinnis, I think. No, Gregory Manchess. So you have, these are old-fashioned illustrated paperbacks where you have spot illustrations, pencil spot illustrations all throughout, and they're really, really good. Gregory Manchess gets in, he's mentioned in fantasy and science fiction award ceremonies at the end of every year. He's so good. They decided to do this. This is the Conquering Sword of Conan, and they decided. Actually, there's no way. Sorry, I keep interrupting myself here. They decided to do Conan to renovate the presentation of Conan for the reading public. They decided to renovate him. Conan had been presented to the reading public decades before by L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter, who came out with a whole series of books. Conan the Conqueror, Conan the Freebooter, Conan the Liberator, that sort of thing. And for many, many Conan readers, they were the definitive thing. They were the way that we were introduced to Conan, me too. But that's not the way that Robert E. Howard wrote Conan. Originally, Robert E. Howard wrote Conan in terms of, in his mind, there was this massive tapestry of a life. Somebody who had seen and done it all. And Robert E. Howard's original conception of writing that life was to plunk down for a short story in one period of his life, and then plunk down in the next short story in a period maybe completely different, decades later, decades earlier of his life, and keep doing that. To sort of emphasize the fact that no matter where you meet Conan, he's having adventures. Where you meet him in his life, he's having adventures. And L. Sprague de Camp and Lynn Carter changed that. Instead, they regularized it, they made it a chronology, and they also, their one unforgivable sin is that they tampered with the text, which should not be done. If we knew somebody now who did that for Shakespeare, we would be outraged. So Ballantine changed that. They did, so one volume is The Coming of Conan the Cimmerian. Then we have The Conquering Sword of Conan, and The Bloody Crown of Conan, and I think there might be one other of these. I think there might be, I don't know if this will even tell me. I think there might be one volume of Conan that I am missing, and I am definitely missing other volumes in this series. Not Conan, but I mean, I think there's a Solomon Kane volume. I don't think there's a Kull volume, but if there's a Kull volume and I don't have it, I really, really should, because I have a strong partiality for Kull the Conqueror. But as it is, these things are sort of must-owns for Conan fans. Ballantine didn't put them out that way. Ballantine didn't crow about these much at all, but they are, in addition to being lovely volumes, because there's all sorts of ornate typescript, and there's original artwork in every one of these things. In addition to all of that, these also go at the presentation of Conan, what the 21st century refers to as the curation. These are curated in what I think is a very intelligent and winning way. So if you're a Conan fan, you really have to have them, and what I really ought to have is all of them. I should make a point of just going and seeing how many volumes there are of Conan, and also of any other Robert E. Howard. Was there a Kull volume that for some unknown reason I'm missing? Even Solomon Kane, who I know, he has the cool factor. Solomon Kane has the cool factor. Everybody loves Solomon Kane, except me. I like him. I like those stories just fine, but they aren't fantastical enough for me. When Solomon Kane encounters a giant gorilla, that's supposed to be a gasper. but when Conan or Kull encounters a dinosaur, that's just a Monday. I like that better. And then the last book on this shelf is something that we have seen here, to put it mildly, many times. This is a battered, weather-beaten copy, hardcover copy of Dune. Just a hardcover Dune by Frank Herbert with this great understated cover illustration of two people on a massive dune. And I'm not quite sure that I remember the genesis of this book. I know that when I found it, wherever I found it, I noticed right away the boards are warped, the pages are a little warped. I thought, okay, well, somebody's going to find you and think you're ready for the garbage. And I didn't have a hardcover Dune. This was before I got there's a beautiful Penguin does a series of science fiction and fantasy hardcovers, and they did little hardcover things with no dust jackets, and they did one for Dune. That was before I had this, so I would want this illustration anyway. So I have that hardcover Dune, and that ends this shelf. It's all Patrick O'Brian, then Robert E. Howard, then Dune. So there's not a dud in the bunch, but it ends the video quickly, relatively quickly. And I have this Dune. I have the Ace paperbacks that Ace very kindly sent me. I have a couple of very old trade paperbacks with the psychedelic illustrations, and I have a couple of the old ochre colored mass market editions of the original Frank Herbert Dune novels. And I know that that's going to stand me in good stead, because the floodgates are going to open. When the Dune movie, I think there's going to be two. It's going to be two massive movies back to back, filming right now at the same time. Massive Hollywood special effects, and also the biggest special effect of all, which is a headlining superstar in the lead role. That is Timothée Chalamet, the star of Call Me By Your Name, who is, I predict, I could be wrong about this, but I predict he's going to be made a superstar by December's release of Little Women. And that when the Dune adaptation that he is starring in as Paul Atreides comes out, he will be the main draw of the movie. I think that's all negative. I hope I'm wrong about all of that, but one way or another, no expense is being spared for that Hollywood extravaganza, and that means that we are going to get flooded with Dune books, with Dune editions. We're going to get flooded with them. Maybe some of them will be worth having, maybe not, but one way or another, those of us who are Dune fans, we should grab hold of our maker hooks, because we're going to get a whole bunch of add-ons and new people and whatnot. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up. We got to 20 minutes, even though I had 3 books to talk about, but I'll be back. I'll see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.